Christian parenting.
It is easy for days or even weeks to pass without connecting in a meaningful way with our kids. Join us for this important conversation on Family Vision.
Hi, my name is Ray Reno. Welcome to Family Vision with my parents, Dr. Rob and Amy Reno, strengthening families through practical, encouraging, and real conversations.
Hi, this is Rob Reno with Visionary Family Ministries here in the new year with my bride, Amy.
It's so fun to be back today.
We hope that you experienced the presence and peace of Jesus in your home this Christmas season. And the new year's here. Feels like real life has hit hard and fast for us. And of course, it's the time of year for talking about resolutions and priorities, replacing bad habits with good ones. So today we're going to talk about something that really needs to be a priority, resolution every year, every month, every day as parents, and that's to be intentional about building heart-connected relationships with our kids. Now, honey, when we say heart-connected relationships, what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's really hard to describe that in some ways. So I'm actually going to go to my book, Not So Perfect Mom, just to read a definition, and then maybe we'll expand on that. But what we mean by a heart-connected relationship, it means that two people feel safe with one another. It means there can be honesty. It is a relationship where each person can be vulnerable about who they are, their faults, character flaws, and mistakes, and still feel loved. Heart connection means we listen to each other and we try to understand one another. It means we know a person is for us and never against us. And while that's a textbook definition from my book, I also want to say that we see, I think, an understanding of heart-connected relationships in movies that we watch, especially as a woman. You know, I love all my rom-coms and Hallmark movies. And really, in those romantic movies, they're showing you the beginning of a heart-connected relationship. You start to feel safe with a person. You start to be vulnerable. We see that all the time. So for me, visual pictures are often even better than word definitions.
Sure. Now, when it comes to having relationships with our kids, like you just defined, with like warmth and trust and honesty and openness, those kinds of relationships don't naturally happen.
That's right.
What's normal and what's natural is to just talk to our kids about life activities. You talk about school, you talk about homework, you talk about what they have to do, you talk about chores or sports or just like today's schedule or to-do list, and weeks can go by where that's all we ever talk about, just the functional things of the day. And all throughout the Bible, God tells us to focus on issues of the heart. A couple of scriptures on this. Jesus says in Matthew 15:18, it says, "But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this is what defiles a person." In Proverbs 4:23 in the NLT says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." So what happens in our kids' hearts, in their spirit, that's what's going to overflow into every area of their life here and in the future. So this is why, when it comes to parenting, connecting with our children's hearts beyond just the day-to-day stuff and tactical things that we're doing is of the utmost importance. So, honey, let's just talk about some practical ways we can move our relationships with our kids beyond superficial to-do stuff into these heart-connected relationships.
Yeah, that is a good idea. And I just want to reiterate what you said about the importance of the heart flowing into absolutely every area of our lives. And one thing I have in this book, Not So Perfect Mom, I write about a mom mission, which is also can be a dad mission, but to make heart connection with your kids important in everyday life. You know, that it's not a one-time thing, but it's an everyday occurrence. And it's difficult to do. And frankly, if I had a dime for all the times I tried to do that and it felt like it completely crashed and burned, you know, I'd be a very rich woman. But it is hard to do. What are some practical ways to do that? And we want to prioritize. I think it first starts with making it a priority in our own hearts as parents. Like, we have to decide and make a decision that that's an important priority, more important than the things that we typically think of as important. You know, if you have young kids, it's developmental things and their friendships and, you know, all the activities that they're in. It's so easy to keep that as a priority so that we can lose track of the fact that how important this heart connection, and even my book, I have a chapter called Attachment, which is another word for just developing this type of intimate relationship. But when you, in the last part of my book, I really talk about these practical, what I call building blocks for these heart-connected relationships. And one of the very first ones is called affection, meaning that affection is so critical for the development of a heart-connected relationship with our kids. But it's easy to understand affection with little ones, and it's a lot harder to understand affection with older ones. So one of the things is just really trying to study your kids and understand what communicates affection to them. In this story, I talk about, you know, my relationship with the high school girls. That, you know, I've had one graduate through high school, and then one's in the middle right now. I have another one coming up. And honestly, I'm thankful for 3 girls. I feel like I learn every time because those are hard years to communicate and learn how to communicate affection to my older girls. And specifically, I know that one example, just to give a very practical example, is that, you know, Lainey and I had a lot of conflict in high school, or can continue to, in regards to clothing and what she's wearing, about just wanting new clothes, or wants to have, you know, she might borrow something and not take good care of it or not return it, all of these issues. And one way I found, you know, the Lord really spoke to me that I just needed to start saying yes to Lainey when she asked to borrow something, even if she had a very imperfect track record with doing a good job on this, because that was a way that was speaking communication to her. And that is a building block, affection. And so having an affectionate home and determining how to communicate affection to the different types of kids that we have is one of the most essential building blocks, I think.
Yeah, you're putting your finger on something so important, especially with those older kids. You know, through counseling through the years, I mean, how many teenagers do we hear tell us, you know, yeah, I talk to my parents a lot, but everything's negative.
Oh my goodness, yes.
They always tell me what I'm doing wrong, and the total lack of yes or affection or affirmation. You know, some of the challenges when it comes to pursuing heart connection, one for me is just getting distracted. Like you said a minute ago, you have to make the decision that this is something you want to do. So when I am on task mode, right,
Yes.
which is accomplish the purposes of the day, and it's easy for me to
Sorry,
get
I'm
on
laughing
that
because
mode.
When are you not
right?
on task mode?
Part of the way God made me, I have gifts in other areas, right?
Sorry, that was really funny.
So it's easy for me to
No,
just
I mean, I
press
think it's
through.
good that you're task mode. I'm not saying, because I'm completely the opposite. So God put us together for a reason.
Exactly.
But it just lets, like me saying when I'm on relational mode. I mean, when am I not?
Good point. So I get distracted from the mission and the purpose of having these essential heart connections with the kids. I also think a lot of us as parents feel just awkward about trying to have the conversations, or we're not in the habit of asking heart-focused questions. We don't get in the habit of asking our children, hey, how are you feeling about what happened? Or is there anything that you're anxious or worried about right now? Or when they're dealing with a disappointment or a loss or some kind of failure or hurt, asking that question, you know, what do you think God is wanting to do in your heart through this? Or even, I think, two of the critical exchanges to build this heart connection with your kids is just asking them how you can pray for them that day. And then going beyond that, asking your kids to pray for you. And like you said a minute ago, honey, one of the barriers is just our own insecurity that this might not go well, or feeling rejected when we try to.
Well, and frankly, I can tell you it's not going to go well. Lots of times it's not going to go well. And that's one of the things that is important to understand, that even if it doesn't go well, that's not necessarily a negative. And that took a long time for me to get that, you know, sometimes you're growing in intimacy through dealing with difficult feelings and difficult conflict, but you're still getting closer even though you're not really liking what you're finding. And it takes a while. You have to kind of accept
Right.
that these attempts will often, especially with older kids, not go well. And the flip side, if you have younger kids and you haven't tried this to be so intentional this with younger kids, that's a nice thing because most likely they are usually eager. Those do go well, So I would encourage you, if you've got kids at different ages, start with your younger ones and maybe gradually move up in the sense that it gives you some positive reinforcement because younger kids typically are dying for these type of connections with their parents.
Right. And with older kids, I'll find sometimes I'll try to reach out, and if I feel like I hit a wall, honestly, that feels like rejection.
Yes.
To me, hurts my feelings, like at a personal level, and that makes me want to withdraw and not put myself out there. So if that's your experience, I would encourage you, express that to your child. Something like, hey, I'm really trying to have a deeper conversation with you here and feel like you're pushing me away, and that's hard for me. Hurts my feelings. I want to be able to talk to you about, real life, what's going on in our hearts and our spirits, not just superficial things. I don't know how your son or daughter is going to react to that, but it's okay to communicate to them, I'm trying to build a deeper connection with you here, and I'm feeling like I'm struggling and this is hard for me.
Let me share a secret that I feel, kind of the Reno family secret that I've always seen help with all ages of kids. And you can kind of communicate this message in different ways at different levels. But for example, with an older kid, when they're doing that and they are rejecting you, and I always pivot from there and say, who you are at home is who you really are. And I know that you think that this way that you're interacting when you're having difficulty with me, a close relationship in your life.
Putting the wall up with
You're putting
you.
the wall up. You don't want me around. I know you think that you're not going to do this to your close friends or you're not going to do this to your future spouse, but I have really bad news for you. And the news is you are. And you maybe you don't care about hurting me right now, but someday you are going to hurt someone with this behavior that you really care about, and you don't want to do that. So when you're working through these things with me, I'm actually helping you. This relationship is helping you have more successful, close relationships in your future, and I know that you want that. And honestly, they may not receive that message at that moment, but it gets through.
It gets through, right?
It does get through. They can understand that. But there are a lot of barriers to building heart-connected relationships. And I want to hit on one that I think people do not expect. I'm actually going to read again from this book, Not So Perfect Mom, because I find that it's something that kind of broadsides people how important this is. And one of my building blocks, actually the second one, is teach your children to honor you. So how does that affect a heart-connected relationship? Well, first of all, honor is an essential ingredient in building heart-connected discipleship relationships with your kids. Remember that the mother-child relationship is special, and of course the father-child one is as well. When your kids are self-sufficient adults, they will not be required to obey you. We do not want to have children we are trying to control, but we do want to have kids that have been raised to honor us. Does that sound selfish? It shouldn't. And I want to stop there for a second because a lot of parents don't want to use this biblical language in their home or don't even want to say it's important to teach my kids to honor me because it seems like they're being selfish. I assume you are training your children to respect their teachers. If your kids play a sport, I'm confident that you are encouraging them to listen and follow the coach's direction. Respect, listening, and obeying are components of honoring relationships. You are continually teaching your kids to honor the people in authority over them. But if you do not teach your own kids to honor you, no one else is going to do it. Numerous times in the Bible, we read instructions about honoring and obeying our parents. Honor for parents ought to be above honor for teachers and coaches. But kids have to be taught and trained to honor their parents because it does not just happen. Now, this is one of, I think, a very critical barrier, to get over. Parents need to understand that teaching your children to honor you is a component of this heart-connected relationship because it's how God designed the family. So if you have kids that don't have a heart of honor towards you, that breaks down, and therefore you can't have that heart-connected relationship. And it's really hard, I think, I think a lot of Christian families don't even use the word in their home in such a way that they understand, that kids even understand it. And we can't necessarily blame the kids because, like what I just read, if we don't teach them to do it, there's literally no one else that's going to do it. You don't have a backup coach. You don't have and sadly, we don't have a culture that is supporting that. But don't underestimate this importance of teaching your kids to honor you. And it's not easy.
No. It's not easy. It's also not too late.
Correct.
You may feel like, gosh, I've got a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old. This has not been built in. It's not too late to begin talking about that with them. It's not too late to be saying, look, this is a value and a virtue that we need in our home for it to function. You need this in order to prepare for adulthood. But wrapping around all of this, we have to understand the huge amount of spiritual attack that's going to come against the heart connection between you and your children. Even this particular phrase is in Scripture. One of the central verses for our whole ministry is Malachi 4:6, where we find the heart of God calling fathers to turn their hearts to their children, and principally mothers too, and for children to turn their hearts to their fathers. That's exactly what we're talking about. The father's heart, the parent's heart's turned to the child's heart's turned to the parent. So if that's what God wants, you can be sure Satan wants the opposite and is working to make it happen. So pursuing these heart-connected relationships is going to be a spiritual battle. If you're feeling hurt, feeling discouraged, feeling disconnected, start with prayer. Ask God to turn your heart to your child and give you the courage to pursue their heart again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's important. I try to keep in my mind all the parents or all the people listening and all the ages of the kids listening out there. And, this is a challenge at any age. I remember I sometimes think we're focused on the older kids talking about the difficulties there. But I just want, you could be having challenges with your younger ones too, as I certainly did. And it's important for a parent to have the mindset of never to give up. Never give up. And understand that even when you're pursuing this and it's negative, that even in the negative things, even in the conflict, that is still good material for building heart connection, because true relationships are messy and they have both the ups and the downs. So I want to encourage everyone out there that if you're feeling discouraged, know that that is from the enemy and that discouragement does not come from God. I think that's one of the best lessons I heard. Whenever you're feeling discouraged, recognize that as something to reject immediately, that is from Satan. You reject that and you put your hope and confidence in a God who can give you the patient endurance to keep pursuing this.
Amen. Well, we are glad you spent this time with us today. We appreciate it, and we'd love to hear from you. You can connect with us through email at podcast@visionaryfam.com. And if you want to go deeper into today's conversation, we'd encourage you to pick up a copy of Visionary Parenting or Not So Perfect Mom, which you can find at our website at visionaryfam.com or wherever you get your books. And we look forward to connecting with you on the next episode of Family Vision.